The 20-foot Douglas fir tree in the center of the crystal ballroom smelled of pine and money, but down on her knees scrubbing a wine stain, Maya Robinson only smelled the bleach that burned her nose. It was Christmas Eve at the Sapphire Grand Hotel in New York City, and the world outside the floor-to-ceiling windows was a swirling vortex of white snow. Inside, however, the air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, roasted chestnuts, and the unspoken assurance that nothing bad could ever happen to people who wore this many diamonds. Maya dipped her rag back into the gray water of her bucket. To the hundreds of guests swirling around her in tuxedos and red velvet gowns, she was not a person. She was merely a piece of moving furniture, an obstacle to be stepped around on the way to the bar. She kept her head down, her posture submissive, hiding the sharp intelligence in her eyes behind a curtain of loose hair. As she moved her cleaning cart toward the VIP section, she paused near a large potted poinsettia plant positioned strategically next to the table reserved for the night's guest of honor. Pretending to dust the leaves, her fingers deftly brushed against the underside of the ceramic pot, checking for the tiny, pulsing red light of the recording device she had planted there hours ago. It was still active. "Easy does it, child," a soft voice whispered. Maya looked up to see Mr. Sterling, the hotel's elderly orchestra conductor, standing beside her. He was adjusting his bow tie, his kind face wrinkled in a conspiratorial smile. Without breaking his gaze from the crowd, he slipped a small, foil-wrapped gingerbread cookie into the deep pocket of her apron. "You've been on your feet for 10 hours. Remember, warmth comes from the heart, not the heating system, my dear." "Thank you, Mr. Sterling," Maya whispered back, touching the pocket. It was the only Christmas gift she would receive this year. Suddenly, a blast of icy wind cut through the warmth of the room as the main doors swung open. Julian Thorne strode in, bringing the storm with him. The billionaire real estate mogul shook his cashmere coat, sending a spray of melting slush onto the pristine marble floor Maya had just polished. He didn't apologize. He didn't even look down. He simply snapped his fingers in the air, a sharp cracking sound that made the nearby waiters flinch. "You," Julian barked, pointing a manicured finger at Maya without making eye contact. "Clean this slush. And don't look at me, it ruins the festive mood." The jazz band faltered for a second. Maya gripped her rag tight, her knuckles turning white. For a heartbeat, the ghost of the woman she used to be, the top-tier financial auditor, wanted to stand up and list the federal laws he was breaking. But she swallowed the urge. The investigation was too important. Slowly, she lowered herself to her knees in front of him, wiping the dirty snow from his Italian leather boots. Julian let out a loud, braying laugh, turning to his entourage. "See? That's the natural order of things. Some are born to walk on marble, others are born to wipe it." He walked away toward the bar, leaving a trail of muddy footprints and cruel laughter in his wake. Maya stood up slowly, her hand instinctively going to the locket hidden beneath her uniform, the one holding her father's picture. She watched Julian's retreating back, her expression hardening into something cold and final. She whispered into the noise of the party, "Laugh while you can, Julian. Midnight is coming." Maya is holding on to her patience, but the clock is ticking toward midnight. If you are still watching and you value stories where dignity stands tall against arrogance, please drop the number 8 in the comments below to let me know you are here with us. And if you haven't already, I highly recommend joining the Black Brilliance family by hitting that subscribe button and turning on the notification bell. Your support is the heartbeat of this channel, helping us continue to create powerful content that informs and inspires. Now, let's head back to the ballroom. The real show is about to begin. Silence. Julian Thorne's voice boomed over the microphone, cutting through the festive chatter like a jagged piece of ice. The jazz band stopped abruptly, the drummer catching his cymbal mid-crash. Julian stood at the center of the dance floor, a glass of champagne in one hand and the microphone in the other, swaying slightly. The room, previously filled with the hum of polite conversation and clinking glasses, fell into an uneasy hush. He had decided that the evening's entertainment was lacking, and in his inebriated state, he had found a new source of amusement. Moments earlier, Maya had been attempting to navigate her heavy cleaning cart toward the service exit, trying to vanish before the midnight toast. She had almost made it to the double doors when a hand clamped down on the handle of her cart, jarring it to a halt. It was Julian. He didn't just stop her. He dragged the cart back toward the center of the room, forcing Maya to follow or risk losing her balance. The wheels squeaked loudly against the polished floor, a sound that drew every eye in the room. "Look at this creature," Julian announced to the captive audience, gesturing at Maya as if she were a zoo exhibit. "Working on Christmas Eve. Probably doesn't even know what fun is. Look at those shoes. I bet she can't even walk in those ugly things without tripping over her own feet." A ripple of nervous laughter moved through the crowd. Some of the wealthy guests looked away, embarrassed, but many others smiled, eager to stay on the billionaire's good side. Maya stood perfectly still, her hands clasped in front of her apron. She could feel the heat of the spotlight burning against her skin, but she didn't flinch. She locked eyes with Mr. Sterling on the bandstand. The old conductor's face was grave, but he gave her a nearly imperceptible nod, tightening his grip on his baton. It was the signal. Julian, mistaking her silence for fear, leaned in closer, his breath smelling of expensive scotch. He turned to the crowd, grinning like a shark. "Let's make a bet," he slurred slightly, enjoying the attention. "If you can dance this tango with me, a real, passionate tango, I'll marry you right here. Or I'll give you $10,000 cash." The room erupted in cruel laughter. The absurdity of the proposition was the height of comedy for them. The idea that a nobody could keep up with Julian Thorne, who prided himself on his ballroom skills, was laughable. Julian held out his hand, expecting her to run away in tears or beg for mercy. Instead, Maya took a slow, deliberate breath. The air in the room seemed to shift, charging with static electricity. She reached behind her head, untied the ribbon holding her hair back, and let it cascade down her shoulders. Then, with a fluid motion, she untied the strings of her waist. She dropped her heavy gray apron to the floor, revealing the simple but fitted black clothes underneath. "I don't need your charity, Mr. Thorne," she says clearly, her voice projecting to the back of the room without a microphone. "But I will take that dance." The heavy gray fabric of the apron hit the marble floor, and with it, the persona of the clumsy maid vanished into thin air. Maya stood in her fitted black trousers and shirt, her spine elongating as she assumed the classic posture of an Argentine tango dancer. She was no longer looking at the floor, her chin was lifted, her eyes locking onto Julian's with a ferocity that made him blink. On the bandstand, Mr. Sterling tapped his baton twice. The festive jingling of holiday bells ceased instantly, replaced by the crying, dramatic swell of a bandoneon. The orchestra launched into a fierce rendition of Por una cabeza, the rhythm sharp and unforgiving. Julian, caught off guard by the sudden shift in atmosphere, instinctively raised his frame, his arrogance kicking in. He reached for Maya, intending to pull her roughly into a clumsy embrace to assert his dominance, but Maya wasn't there to be led. As his hand touched her waist, she didn't shrink away. Instead, she leaned into the contact, creating a tension that felt like a coiled spring. When Julian tried to shove her into a back step, she pivoted on a dime, using his own momentum to send him spinning. The crowd gasped. The sound of champagne glasses clinking stopped completely. "Relax, Julian," Maya whispered, her voice low and smooth as velvet, audible only to him. "You step so heavy, just like you trample on your employees." "What did you say?" Julian hissed, trying to regain his footing. He attempted to force a complex turn, a move designed to trip an amateur. Maya anticipated it before he even shifted his weight. She executed a perfect gancho, hooking her leg around his with surgical precision, locking him in place. She was leading him now. She drove him across the floor, her legs slicing through the air in sharp boleos that looked more like martial arts kicks than dance steps. Sweat began to bead on Julian's forehead. He was breathless, not from exertion, but from panic. Every time he tried to break away or slow down, Maya tightened her grip, forcing him to look at her. She wasn't just dancing, she was hunting. The guests were mesmerized, their mouths agape, watching the maid dismantle the billionaire with nothing but rhythm and glare. "Who are you?" Julian stammered, his eyes darting around the room, realizing he was losing control of his own show. Maya didn't answer. The music reached a feverish crescendo. With a sudden burst of energy, she spun away from him, letting him stumble forward, grasping at empty air. Then she snapped back, catching him in a dramatic dip, reversing the traditional roles. She held him there, suspended above the floor, looking down at him with a mix of pity and triumph. The music cut with a final, thunderous chord. Maya stood alone in the spotlight, breathing steadily, while Julian scrambled to right himself, his tuxedo disheveled and his dignity shattered. As the applause died down, replaced by confused murmurs, Maya walked slowly back to him. She didn't bow. She leaned in close, her eyes dark and unyielding, and whispered, "The dance is over, Julian. And so is your game." Maya just turned the tables with that breathtaking performance. If you are feeling the heat of that tango and standing with her in this moment of triumph, please drop the number 3 in the comments below. Let me know you are here witnessing this payback. And if you believe in celebrating strength and resilience, I invite you to subscribe to Black Brilliance and hit that notification bell. Your support is what empowers us to keep bringing you these inspiring stories of justice. Now, hold your breath. The music has stopped, but the real reckoning is about to start. The silence that followed Maya's whisper was heavier than the velvet curtains draping the ballroom windows. Julian pulled back from her as if burned, his face a mask of confusion and rapidly growing anger. He smoothed his rumpled tuxedo jacket, his hands trembling slightly, and looked around at the guests who were staring at him with a mixture of shock and pity. The spell of his invincibility had been broken, not by a business rival, but by a woman he had tried to humiliate for sport. "A charming performance," Julian said, his voice straining to find its usual arrogant cadence. He forced a tight, fake smile. "Truly. You should be on Broadway, not scrubbing floors." "Security. Get this woman out of here immediately. She's clearly deranged and has had too much to drink." 2 burly security guards started to move from the shadows near the entrance, but Maya didn't flinch. She simply turned her back on Julian and walked calmly toward the bandstand. She reached out and tapped the microphone stand near the piano, a deliberate callback to the potted plant she had checked earlier that evening. Catching Mr. Sterling's eye, she gave a single, decisive nod. The conductor didn't hesitate. He reached down to the soundboard next to his piano bench and pressed a button. Suddenly, the speakers that had been playing holiday jazz crackled to life, but it wasn't music that filled the room. It was a voice. Julian's voice, clear, crisp, and undeniably sober. "Adjust the books, Richard. Just do it," the recording boomed. "Steal from the employee pension fund if you have to. Nobody looks at the cleaning staff's retirement accounts. They're invisible. Just like Robinson was." The color drained from Julian's face. He lunged toward the stage. "Turn it off. That's fake. That's AI." But the recording continued, louder now, drowning out his protests. "Frame Elias Robinson if you have to. Plant the offshore transaction records on his laptop. Dead men don't talk, and his daughter is too busy scrubbing toilets to notice." A collective gasp ripped through the crowd. The wealthy socialites, who moments ago were sipping champagne, now looked at Julian with open disgust. In their world, making money was a game, but stealing from the pensions of the poor and bragging about framing a dead man was a vulgarity they couldn't stomach. The illusion of Julian Thorne as a respectable business leader shattered instantly. Maya stepped up to the microphone, her voice steady and projecting authority over the murmurs of the crowd. "My father didn't talk, Julian. But I do," she said, her gaze piercing through him. "I didn't spend the last 8 months scrubbing your floors because I needed the money. I spent them collecting every document you shredded, every file you deleted, and every conversation you thought was private. My name isn't Cleaning Girl. It is Maya Robinson, senior auditor for the state of New York." Julian staggered back, looking for an escape, for an ally, for anyone who would stand by him. But there was no one. He was completely alone in the center of the room he had paid for. Julian's face turns as white as the snow outside as the heavy double doors of the ballroom burst open with a resounding crash. The burst of cold air from the open doors chilled the room instantly, but nowhere near as cold as the look in Julian Thorne's eyes. A dozen figures in dark blue windbreakers with FBI emblazoned in yellow letters swarmed into the ballroom, moving with practiced efficiency. The festive bubble of the Sapphire Grand popped in an instant, replaced by the stark reality of federal law enforcement. Julian stumbled backward, knocking over a tray of hors d'oeuvres. "What is the meaning of this? Do you know who I am?" he screamed, his voice cracking with panic. "We know exactly who you are, Mr. Thorne." The voice came from right beside him. The clumsy waiter who had dropped the champagne tray earlier in the evening stepped forward. He reached up, peeled off his fake mustache, and discarded his white service jacket, revealing a badge clipped to his belt. "Special Agent Carter, FBI Financial Crimes Division. You are under arrest for grand larceny, tax evasion, and conspiracy to defraud." As Carter spun Julian around and snapped the handcuffs onto his wrists, the sound of the metal clicking shut echoed through the silent ballroom like a gunshot. Julian struggled, his eyes darting frantically around the room, searching for a lifeline. He spotted Richard Petton, a banking executive he had known for 20 years, standing near the bar. "Richard, tell them," Julian pleaded, sweat streaming down his face. "This is a mistake. Call the senator." "Richard, look at me." Richard Petton didn't move. He didn't step forward to help. Instead, he deliberately turned his back, picking up his scotch and engaging in a whispered conversation with the woman next to him. One by one, the other guests followed suit. Victoria Ashford, who had laughed the loudest at Julian's jokes earlier, busied herself with inspecting her diamond bracelet. In their world, a man could be forgiven for being ruthless, but he could never be forgiven for being caught. Julian wasn't just being arrested, he was being erased. Desperate and humiliated, Julian was dragged toward the exit, his feet scuffing the same marble floor he had forced Maya to clean. As he passed her, he lunged, straining against Agent Carter's grip, his face twisted into a mask of pure venom. "You're nothing," he spat at her, foam forming at the corners of his mouth. "You hear me? You're just a maid. A nobody." Maya didn't flinch. She stood tall, holding the flash drive containing the final evidence in her hand. She looked at the man who had destroyed her father's life, seeing him now not as a monster, but as a small, pathetic thief. "And you, Julian," she replied softly, her voice calm and absolute, "are a memory." The agents pushed him through the doors and into the snowy night. The sirens wailed outside, fading slowly as the patrol cars drove away. The guests began to murmur, signaling for their coats and ballots, eager to distance themselves from the scandal. Slowly, the ballroom emptied, leaving only the remnants of the party and the echoes of the tango. Maya stands alone in the center of the empty dance floor, taking a deep breath as the first true sense of peace settles over her. The red and blue lights of the police cruisers faded into the distance, leaving the Sapphire Grand silent under the falling snow of Christmas Eve. Inside the hotel, the party was effectively over, the remaining guests too uncomfortable to continue dancing. But outside, the air was crisp and clean, cleansing the city of the night's toxicity. Maya stepped out of the service entrance, no longer wearing the gray uniform of a maid or the black attire of a tango dancer. She was dressed in her own winter coat, a simple wool trench that looked warm and dignified. She took a deep breath, letting the cold air fill her lungs, expelling the smell of bleach and pretension that had clung to her for months. "Leaving so soon," a gentle voice called out. Mr. Sterling stood by the valet stand, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. He smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling with genuine affection. He handed a cup to Maya, and then, reaching into his pocket, he pulled out another foil-wrapped gingerbread cookie, identical to the one he had given her hours ago. "I thought you might need this for the ride home," the conductor said softly. "Your father would be very proud, Maya. You didn't just dance tonight, you fought. And you won." Maya took the cookie, holding it like a precious jewel. It wasn't just about winning, Mr. Sterling. It was about balance. She paused, looking at the grand facade of the hotel. "The state awards a whistleblower percentage for recovering stolen tax money. It's a significant amount. I imagine you'll be taking a well-deserved vacation?" Mr. Sterling asked. Maya shook her head, smiling. "No. I'm filing the paperwork tomorrow to start the Elias Robinson Scholarship Fund. It will pay for the college tuition of children whose parents work in service jobs, cleaning staff, waiters, doormen. No child should have to fight alone in the dark like I did." A bright yellow taxi pulled up to the curb, a humble contrast to the limousines that usually line the driveway. The driver honked lightly. Maya turned to Mr. Sterling and gave him a fierce, warm hug, bridging the gap between their generations. "Merry Christmas, Mr. Sterling," she whispered. "Merry Christmas, Maya," he replied, tipping an imaginary hat. Maya climbed into the back of the cab. As the car pulled away, she didn't look at her phone or check the news. She turned in her seat to look back at the hotel one last time. It was no longer a fortress of fear or a monument to arrogance. It was just a building. She had reclaimed her history, and in doing so, she had built a future for others. Some people dance to impress. Maya danced to set the truth free. And that is the most beautiful tango of all. Maya's journey tonight reminds us that true dignity is never defined by the uniform we wear, but by the integrity we keep when no one is watching. Like a diamond hidden in the rough, the most extraordinary brilliance often lies within the people society chooses to overlook. When we choose to look past the surface and treat every soul with unconditional kindness, we don't just change a moment, we have the power to change a life. If this dance of justice and redemption warmed your heart, please consider joining our growing family here at Black Brilliance. Subscribe and share your thoughts below. Let's continue to celebrate the stories that prove light will always shine through the darkness.